Go on, friends. This is Rick, and welcome to your seat at the table. And this is Lorien and the Halls of the Elven Smiths. Perhaps one of my most favorite supplements for MERP is this particular one, and I enjoy it on several levels. And mostly for the reading, I have read and reread this thing many times over the decades. I have run some campaigns. I've utilized this a number of times to aid me in creating Elvish realms and Elvish communities in other campaigns, mostly in Dungeons & Dragons. It is very nice and very useful for those of you who are interested in Elvish whatever, right? So this one here was distributed by Iron Crown Enterprises, of course, and 1986, the year after I graduated high school. So there's several parts of this, and it's kind of hard to do a really just a review of this in detail without spending an inordinate amount of time that's not usually welcome when it comes to these sort of videos. I know I have habits of doing that anyway, but I'm just wanting to put it out. So what we're looking at is the areas around Aragon or Holland and Lorien. There's a whole section and chapter on the elves and specifically, and then the technology of the jewel smiths themselves, which is a big portion of what the source book's about, politics and power, the fortress of the Eldar, Ost-In-Edhil in the Second Age, Ost-In-Edhil in the Third Age, politics and power, the Golden Wood, Lorien or Lothlorien, depending on what age and who's there, sites of interest, etc., etc. So we'll do a glaze through and go from there, and all your basic conversions and things like that for making it useful for any game system, which is what still makes MERP material valid today, is the fact that this first couple pages allows you to take any version, any edition, any play system that you enjoy that's a fantasy-based play system and take this and plug and play. So a little bit of effort, a little bit of work, and you can convert the stats in here to fit any system you want to play, which makes everything still relevant no matter the fact it was produced in 86 or was produced yesterday. Just pointing this out. So we got an introduction, timeline of events, a little bit of a blueprint here for the map. There's another map that goes with it, and it's either in my stack of pile over here or not. I'm sure somebody will come up with it and post it on the internet for everybody to enjoy. We got the lands to the east, Lorien, the climate, the flora, the fauna, and the wilds outside, and the lands to the west, Aragon or Holland, and the Holly land. And I will ask for forgiveness for butchering place names and things like that, because they're hard for me. They're hard to pronounce. And my idea of pronunciation isn't always the same as others. So we got the elves, general attributes, familiar and geographic divisions, the language, physical characteristics, their religion. Then we had to break them down to Vanir, the Noldar, the Teleri, the Sindar and Nandar, the Abari, Elven racial tree, goes back and breaks them down even further. Then we get into section of technology, the jewel smiths, the craft skill and mechanical design, in a word, technology of the Noldar of Aragon is never surpassed at any time in the past or future of Middle-earth. As all the elves of the Undying Lands, with the aid of the Valar, achieve perhaps the greatest feats, and the dwarves are most industrious engineers, it is the Gwethith I Meridan who excel in wedding beauty to function, create items of magical and mechanical. So, what they're saying here is Ost-In-Edhil is perhaps the most advanced city ever created in Middle-earth, in the history of Middle-earth, period. Now, that's not to say what in the future the humanity will do in another, in their age of control, but from perspective speaking, it brings fantastic and wondrous visions in my mind of what this city must have been like at its height. The marriage, perfect marriage of technology and architecture with nature, magic and mechanical conveyances and gizmos and devices and stuff that made the city function even on the next level. And then there's importance, and this it gets talked about a couple times, and I brought it up a few times in the past. The magic in Middle Earth is quite different from what we were traditionally used with the flashbang and odd shock and power that we see in most sword and sorcery and high fantasy game systems. Middle Earth, Tolkien's idea of magic was much more sublime and subtle and rare. And as time progresses, it becomes even more so. And so, in the earliest days of the First Age, we see the vast amount of capability and magical use. And then, as time has progressed, it becomes less and less and less, even to the point where, in the time of the War of the Ring, magic is very subtle. Gandalf is reluctant to use his magic very often because it's easily identified by anybody else of power that's within distance, a certain amount of distance, which we're not quite defined. He talks about it about, great, I just sent up a message to anybody from here to there that listing knows this is where Gandalf is. So anyway, the smiths, the tools and techniques. And why is any of this pertinent? Well, the entire premise behind the Lord of the Rings would not exist if Sauron did not have the ability to corrupt and to entice these high technologically magical creators of the Eldar in this particular place and time into crafting the very 19 rings that his one ring is supposed to dominate. And without that, there's nothing. There's also an implication that there are many more smaller, lesser rings of magic and power that were crafted as Gandalf tells Frodo, mere essays in the art. And this would have been items that these crafters, Celebrimbor and his apprentices and his fellow craftsmen were creating to do all kinds of things. So the fact that there might be other rings of invisibility out there was actually plausible. And according to Gandalf, what set the One Ring apart was its connection to Sauron and its ability to dominate everybody. So its ability to turn its wearer invisible was kind of a side effect, perhaps not even an intentional effect of the ring by Sauron, because it's shown in the movies and implied in the books that when Sauron wears it, he does not turn invisible unless he has the ability to do it at will. So Elvish smelting, high jewel smithies, workshops, silversmithies, goldsmithies, etc. Then we got the Elves of Lorien, the Elves of Ost-In-Edhil. Eregion was informally founded by Galadriel and Celeborn, who led a large contingent of Noldor eastward out of the early Second Age. As they traveled, they were joined by a number of Nandor and Sylvan elves, as well as Sindar refugees from Dorith. Thus, only the Noldor were the most notable of the group. They most certainly were not the only inhabitants. In fact, they're not even the majority by the time that Eregion is settled. They naturally are at the top of the Elven hierarchical system. However, the rule of lesser kindreds by birthright and by their, quote, blessed status. So we get the politics and power of the Eldar and Ost-In-Edhil, the Second Age, the city overview, the lore of gifts of Sauron, the jewelsmiths. It says here, the Gwaith-Meridan are the people of the jewelsmiths, a brotherhood of forgers, smiths, and craftsmen who were formed very soon after the Noldar and their followings decided to settle in Eregion. Their headquarters is, the halls of the jewelsmiths. For love of Pete, this Elvish just kills me. Twists my tongue, something fierce. The life just outside of Ost-In-Edhil. As the name implies, this brotherhood is a close-knit group. Admission to the brother requires blah, 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 blah. Celebrimbor, among the greatest Noldarian elves, Celebrimbor, Hand of Silver. The smith was born and lived an early life in Northrod and studied the ways of his grandfather. So this man, this particular elf, so famous, It was not one of the original elves who came from the Undying Lands. He was born in western Middle-earth, the Lorien, before the War of Wrath and the destruction of part of Middle-earth, the breaking of the world. A bunch of other well-known, famous elves. A lot of these are relatives of Galadriel. Items of note: the Rings of Power, Ost-In-Edhil in the Third Age. Although the city ceased to exist in the Second Age, 1697, when Sauron's armies laid waste to all of Holland, many of the buildings were left intact, and a few even survived, or at least partially intact, in the Third Age. That's interesting to know. And I ran in one campaign in Middle-earth where some of the characters actually went on a quest to find an item that was lost in in part of the city, and it was pretty fantastic. At least I thought it was. I guess I'm tooting my own horn. So, Lorien, Third Age, 1981 to 3020. We get a breakdown: the glades or the guilds, the Weaver's Glade, the Boatman's Glade, the Guardian's Glade, Smith's Glade, etc., etc. Galadriel and her stats, Celeborn and his stats. Sites of interest: the Fortress of the Eldar. Ost-In-Edhil, the Fortress of the Eldar, is one of the most beautiful and complex cities to grace Middle-earth. Although technically a fortress, the designs of Eldar quickly outgrew the original intentions. Situated just down the river from the confluence of Sauron and the Gladden rivers, Ost-In-Edhil is built on a bluff of granite, looks westward over a long swell of the Gladden, a small lake called by the Noldor the Pool of Rest. This lake was originally formed by a natural dam at rocks further west, later enhanced by Noldarian engineers. Guarding the northwest edge of the city bluff is a small, swift river called the Tumbling Laughter, which drains off the runoff from the rolling hills to the north. Blah, blah, blah. I give it an interesting overall plan of the city, its defenses, lands around. We have a few select locations. This would be the sites within the city: Celeborn and Galadriel's house, Celebrimbor's house. And just to give an essence for anybody who doesn't really grasp just how advanced the city was, first off, they have glass elevators that rise up and down the outside of these bluffs in several key locations that make it easy. Otherwise, you get this pretty arduous climb up a very large set of stairs to get to the top of the city. There's a lot of magical and mechanical machinery and lighting and conveniences, things that make your life more comfortable. Galadriel's house and Celebrimbor's house has running and hot and cold running water as an example. Celebrimbor actually has items that allow such that work similar to an oven and a refrigerator, things that are magically created to make life simpler. It just, you can see if I can find that spot. Bath Library. Yeah. Unlike most of the Noldar, who have many servants, Celebrimbor only has one, Daniel, otherwise devoted, also known as devoted to the smith, a Noldor of the House of Fingolfin. Daniel is a characteristic blonde hair, is tall, lean, and indeed the Master Smith's dedicated servant. His duties are made easier by the plethora of strange and magical devices that fill the house. While Celebrimbor and Daniel have keys to all the doors in the house except the vaults, for which only the Master Smith has. All right. All the windows are nearly unbreakable glass, although most can be opened. They all have extremely hard locks. The kitchen. This room is filled with a variety of strange objects, most of them magical, all of them designed to aid in food preparation. Celebrimbor's amusement creating minor items of power from mundane is clearly revealed. The pantry includes a number of cabinets magically maintained a cool temperature to keep food from spoiling. Just a couple examples of what can be found here. And the interesting triangular design of Celebrimbor's house, and a lot of the follows form of a lot of the Noldar construction of the city itself. This is Angor's house, or the Sauron's hideout, or basically Sauron's flat, while he was pretending to, masquerading to be, Anar's house, you know, his own grand palace, when he was parading around pretending to be the Lord of Gifts. Bell towers, the high citadel, parks, the Ortani. These devices, called Ortani, to lift up, are no less than elevators, which, though manually operated, are cleverly designed to operate with smooth efficiency. There are not many of these machines, which are placed at a great height as span or cargo is moved. 3 are located adjacent to the docks, 1 in the central tower, and 2 on each side of the city gates. Last, and undoubtedly most beautiful one, is built against the wall behind Galadriel and Celeborn's house, connecting their enclosure to the upper city. Though relatively short, at 65 feet high, it is an elegant glass-enclosed carriage clinging to the white marble wall. The night is lit with many small lamps, looking like a strange, huge crystal and gold lantern as it glides skyward. The lifts are operated by counterweights and other complex mechanisms that act to balance the weight of the passengers. Controlled externally by an operator, they run on steel tracks supported by several cables. All can be locked to the top and disabled should the city be attacked. Just as an example. There's some fantastic thing. I could do a whole video on just the city and all the detail and all the things that are going on in here. So it is pretty fantastic. There's a view of the fortress proper. You give you an idea of the architecture that you'll find throughout the city. The halls of the jewelsmiths, part of the fortress, and south court, lower levels. And then we got the breakdown of the halls, the metal halls, the silver halls, the glass halls. Okay, we got sites of interest in Lorien, Karis Gladrian, Siren Albroth, adventure guidelines for some adventures set within these realms. And so you potentially, with this one source book, you could have an all Elvish campaign, you could have Elvish encounters, so on and so forth if you wanted to. Lots of NPCs that are useful for populating your world. But like I said, I'm really a fan of all of them, pretty much all of them. There are a few that I can go, but pretty much all of them I really enjoy. But this one here would be in the top 5, without a doubt. Perhaps equal to Moria as being useful and informative of a very important piece of what makes Middle Earth, and what makes it magical. So, until next time, this is Rick, and I hope if you find one of these, you get an opportunity to take a read on your own. I would highly recommend it. I wish they would see these come back in an updated, more modern version. Who knows? Maybe somebody out there, someplace, one of you perhaps, will figure out a way to reintroduce MERP to the new generations and in a modern version. Till next time, this is Rick, and this is your seat.